Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last session of the Path to 100% Clean Energy Education Series. My name is Lillian Anderson, and I'm the Director of Energy Programs at Virginia Conservation Network. Virginia Conservation Network is the partnership of over 160 different environmental organizations, all doing work across the Commonwealth to advance environmental protections at the state level. And we are so glad that you could join us today. So this three-part webinar series was really designed to give policymakers, candidates, advocates, and community members the tools and the knowledge that they need to understand Virginia's clean energy transition, so where we stand today, the key policy pillars driving progress, and the possible pathways ahead as we work towards a 100% clean energy future. And as Virginia continues on its path to 100% clean energy, energy storage will play a critical role in ensuring a reliable, resilient, and flexible power grid. So this webinar will provide a foundational overview of what energy storage is, the range of technologies available, and how storage works alongside solar and wind to meet energy demand. We'll also cover the current policy landscape in Virginia as it relates to storage. So we have 4 speakers with us today to talk about energy storage from a few different angles. First, we have Thad Culley, the Director of Public Policy for Sunrun, the largest provider of residential solar and energy storage services in the country. And prior to joining Sunrun, Thad was the Senior Regional Director and Regulatory Counsel for the national nonprofit Vote Solar and a partner at the renewable energy law firm Keys and Fox, where he represented clients in net metering and interconnection proceedings, electric utility rate cases, and other general distributed energy resource policy matters. And then we have Chris Meyer, a senior project developer for East Point Energy. In Chris's role, he secures use permits for battery storage projects throughout Virginia. And previous to this role, he worked on international climate change policy and carbon markets for the Environmental Defense Fund, led the local Energy Alliance program based in Charlottesville, and served in the Peace Corps in Panama. And then we'll have Sarah Jackson with us from Forum Energy, where she is the Senior Policy Manager for the Eastern region. And prior to this role, Sarah served as the Northeast Regional Climate and Energy Policy Manager at the Nature Conservancy and was a Senior Associate at Synapse Energy Economics. Sarah also has experience in environmental policy and advocacy through roles at organizations like Earth Justice and the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition. And lastly, we have Stephanie Gagnon-Rodriguez, who is the Director of Regional Clean Energy Economies at the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, where she leads the Regional Roundtable program and supports the organization's low-carbon economic development work. Through this program, she has convened leaders of business, state, and local government, and communities in 18 states to explore place-based economic development opportunities in the build-out of low-carbon solutions, and supported the collaborative development of recommendations for federal and state policymakers. So we'll begin today with presentations from all of our speakers, and then we'll take all of your questions at the end. So please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom window to submit questions throughout the session. And with that, I will turn it over to Thad first.
Great. Thank you so much, Lillian. I hope everyone's able to hear. I do appreciate the flexibility of this group to let me go first. I had some unexpected travel that came up, so I'm talking to you today from a food court in the Maryland Energy Administration. So it's a first for me. I hope it's good. So appreciate the flexibility from everyone. And this is a group that should be flexible. So no more dad jokes, I promise. So yes, my name is Thad Culley, Director of Regulatory Policy on the policy team for Sunrun. And as Lillian mentioned, we're the largest provider in the country. If we can go to the next slide. Just to give a little scale about what we do. So Sunrun's been around since 2007, added batteries to our mix in 2016. We have recently engaged in a partnership with Ford on their F-150 Lightning to do some really innovative things using the truck to back up the home, and very soon to use the truck as a grid resource to be able to export to the grid and provide compensation for the customer and help reduce peak time. So our portfolio of interest continues to grow as things behind the meter continue to offer new opportunities. Big year last year for us, we hit a 1 millionth customer. So just to give a sense of scale, that was 130,000 home batteries of that mix. Currently, we are getting close to 200,000. 70% of our new installs include batteries. So I guess I'm saying this to justify why is a person from a solar company on a storage webinar. So we have very much shifted into being a kind of storage first company that also provides solar to go with that. We think this is a very valuable, flexible resource at the grid edge. And we've been very active in trying to establish policies to enable us to use those assets to support the grid and create value for ourselves and for our customers. And so we go to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. So as we see, like most people, when they think about adding a battery device to their home, they tend to do it in places where there are a lot of blackouts or where rate designs are such that it makes sense to have the battery to be able to do some simple arbitrage of, using solar when it's most affordable and you're avoiding the most expensive power from the grid. So that might be if you're on a time of use rate, that peak cost is a lot higher than the off peak. So you can shift your usage to that off peak period using a battery. But we're also seeing it across the country in California with all the wildfires and preemptive power shutoffs that they do there to try to prevent those conditions from turning into catastrophic wildfires. The coastal states that experience long outages due to major hurricanes, that being Florida, also in Puerto Rico is a very large market there where virtually everyone that has solar on their house also has a battery, given the instability of the grid in Puerto Rico. So we've seen the kind of natural evolution of customers wanting to have the battery for convenience and for resilience, and really where there hasn't been a policy opportunity for those customers to use their battery, to use their property and their investment to create some additional value for themselves. And so that's really what I'm going to talk about here today. And again, I may be out of order from our original thought, but I think it's important to say, what are homeowners, how are they interfacing with battery technologies? And I think this is a great start. So currently, as you can see from this map, the dark blue are states that have already initiated some policy that compensates customers for using their batteries to provide some value to the grid. And the light blue are states, including Virginia, where things are underway, things are under development. So we expect this map to really fill out over the next few years. It's really grown a lot in the last 2 or 3. But these tend to be, now I'll make the distinction here, these tend to be state programs that the state utility commissions approve. They're very analogous to state demand response programs where you're compensating customers for providing a retail service. So you're not directly integrated in and participating in a wholesale market, which can be very complicated, particularly for small, very small resources. One thing that has happened at the federal level, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has issued an Order 2222, and this was several years ago, that would enable distributed energy resources like solar and batteries on a residential premises to be aggregated and put together and bid into the markets or providing any market service. That is kind of in the very early days. All of the ISOs like PJM and New England ISO and the rest have submitted their implementation plans. And I think all at kind of different timelines of when those things will actually be actionable. But that is on the horizon as a potential another avenue for customers with batteries to be able to get some compensation for using them, other than just having them for resilience. My personal opinion of that is I think there will be a number of changes that need to get made for that to be viable, because it still has a lot of headwinds and a lot of barriers for residential customers to be able to directly participate. So the emphasis really still remains on state-led programs that will, provide, I think, a very straightforward and seamless customer experience to be able to enroll in events and be compensated for, dispatching their battery during peak events. If we could go to the next slide, please. So what are we talking about when we talk about a state virtual power plant program? Like, what is it actually doing? Well, it could evolve and do a lot of different things. But as of right now, most of these programs are just aiming at the kind of simple target, which is we know when the system peaks. We know that dispatching batteries and helping reduce the customer's load at that time is important, but also injecting electrons into the grid and providing a resource locally is also going to relieve strain on the grid and help overall economics for all ratepayers. So those are really the first kind of off-the-shelf virtual power plant programs that we've seen. And they're pretty simple to execute. You don't need to have a whole lot of data. I think we tend to do, I think our major programs are conducted via email. So it is not this very complicated communications devices talking to each other across the interwebs. No, this is very simple that we get a dispatch request from the utility for the program administrator, and we activate all of our systems to perform. So that is, I think, something that's really fun to tell regulators about, that these programs are easy to develop and deploy and can be done so in a fast timeline. For example, Texas, after Winter Storm Uri, the commission there set to mind to enable batteries to help kick in and help reduce some of the load shedding they had to do during that storm and during the hours of constraint. And within 9 months, they had already stood up a program. I think similarly, and we'll get to an example in a further slide, in North Carolina, it was also a very compacted timeline where a policy was developed, and it's now up and running and I think showing some results. So let's go to the next slide. So perfect. I was just teeing up this example. So in North Carolina, this was as a part of the net metering conversations. There was a settlement that would have moved all customers to a time of use rate, and they would have the option of being compensated for having a smart thermostat, so doing traditional demand response. The commission saw that and said, well, we see a huge opportunity if we were leaning into the batteries. So we would like to do a pilot where we will provide an upfront payment to customers to while they're going solar and engaging in this solar choice net metering version. They will also agree to either utilize their battery and respond to critical peak pricing through a time of use rate. So we're responding kind of the natural price signals in the retail rate, or allow the utility to dispatch them so that they can hit their system needs in the winter and the summer. That program would stand up about 60 megawatts of solar, and I think we picture this about 6,000 homes. And I believe it's over halfway subscribed at this point and has already had several events. And from all intents and purposes is a popular program with both, I think, the utilities, customers, and I guess we'll find out soon when they go back to the commission if they're popular with regulators. But that has been an example of really the only state in the Southeast so far to take this step, and definitely some kudos to the folks for getting that done. The next example I was going to point to doesn't involve upfront money, but really is a pay for performance model. And so here you're really trying to compensate batteries for the value they provide to the grid, and it's not really considered an incentive. This is just reflecting the value, and that's where we want to land. We want to have sustainable programs that compensate customers for the values they're providing. Connected Solutions is really truly the simplest and kind of the gold standard for this peak reduction model. Customers get a locked-in 5-year. They can have some visibility for what the value will be for participating in these programs. And they know that the utility will not over-exercise their battery. They will do 60 events a year max. And each event will be about 2 to 3 hours. So when you think about a Powerwall or any other home battery, it's probably designed for a 4-hour dispatch. If you were to condense the number of hours that it's going to perform, then you can actually increase the amount of capacity you're dispatching at that one time. So having a 2 to 3 hour window for residential customers is really the gold standard. It helps you get more bang for the buck, and instead of spreading it out over 4 hours, when you can fairly readily determine where that real peak event is going to happen within that window. So we've been very satisfied with Connected Solutions. I believe the utilities and the program administrators in Massachusetts, where it's really at its peak, have also been very praiseworthy of this program. So we are looking to see where else this could be developed. And currently in Maryland, there are some proposals before the Public Service Commission that emulate this model. So we will see in the coming months whether that gets further down that road. And next slide, please. And I know I'll move along here so we can go to the next speaker. So where does that leave us in Virginia? Well, last year, SB 1100 passed and was signed. Well, actually became effective, which was, I think, to a great joy of many, May 2nd, 2025. I actually have the date wrong here. I apologize for that. September 15th is the date that Dominion released a webinar and a link to a comment form where the public can provide comment on what they would like to see in a virtual power plant. And there's also going to be a battery-specific conversation that happens at their annual, or their DSM, and I apologize for any background noise where I'm at, for their DSM annual meeting. The utilities or Dominion will file a proposal December 1st, and we expect to have that in their estimate that they would have that program kind of rolled out and ramping up in August, which means we will not really be available this summer of 2026. So with the pilot period ending July 2028, we will get one full summer and I guess a couple of winter seasons to kind of see how this goes. As it concerns residential use of batteries, the law is very specific, but it wants to see at least 15 megawatts of residential batteries. So I'm optimistic and hopeful that some of the policies I've laid out here, the gold standards, the pay for performance, will make a lot of sense and will be a model that is considered as Virginia and Dominion look to go forward on this. But again, I appreciate the invitation to be here. Apologize for the less than ideal ambiance, but thank you again for running through the slides for me, William. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Thad, and thank you for being here. For folks who have questions specifically for Thad, if you want to put those in the Q&A box and your email attached to them, we'll make sure that we get back to y'all with those answers after the webinar. And next up, we have Chris.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and excited to be here. See a lot of folks I know attending here, and happy to connect with a lot of you again. Chris Meyer, and as Lillian mentioned, I'm a senior project developer for East Point Energy. I have the responsibility of developing projects for East Point throughout the state of Virginia here, which includes going from negotiating for land with landowners to getting the permits and all the way through helping get permit by rule with state DEQ, et cetera, and then helping oversee some of the construction. But wanted to start with a slide that some of you actually might recognize if you attended the most recent Committee on Electricity Utility Regulation, and they had a presentation on energy storage, and I cribbed this from Dominion because I did a pretty good job of showing kind of the types of energy storage that you might see deployed. It's not only here in Virginia, but throughout. And I think what just kind of relating to what Thad was just discussing, what he was talking about was a lot is probably lithium-ion battery mostly, and that's again kind of electronic chemistry that battery that can be used more for short-term duration deployment and use. We also have here, though, I wanted to point out pumped hydro. This is actually Virginia is one of the hosts to one of the largest in the world, Bath County. And that pumped hydro basically functions though through taking power from the electricity grid, using that to pump water up into a number of reservoirs, and then allowing that water to crash through down some tunnels into some turbines and generating more electricity. In general, and then I think what this also slide shows, could try to show is there's different types of energy storage for different uses. And they kind of are good at a lot of different things. And I think Sarah will also talk about long duration storage here after me and kind of its use case and why it is needed as part of, I think, this bigger picture of all the different types of energy storage and how they support our electricity grid. All right. As simplest form, and when I talk about energy storage going forward, and specifically battery energy storage, or BESS, as it's commonly referred to, we are talking about Again, a lot of this specifically for short-term duration is lithium ion, phosphate, nickel, magnesium, cobalt type of batteries. These are the lithium ion batteries that you find in your laptops if you're watching this webinar on, your cell phones and electric vehicles, etc. Very kind of known technology, stable, deployed in a lot of different places. We know how it acts, what we need to do to keep it functioning safely, etc. It also has a lot of different values for the electricity grid, specifically to not only providing what we call frequency regulation. So think about if we have solar power generators for our grid, solar arrays. If that sun goes behind a cloud, you don't turn off your light bulb, you don't turn off your air conditioner, but the electricity grid, still has to produce that power. Well, batteries can kick in and basically fill that gap while that cloud goes between the sun and those solar arrays. What it also can do is become basically what we call generation, or provide capacity for peak demand. So we charge our batteries up and we put power back on like any other power generator, specifically when there's the most demand on the electricity grid. So what we call peak power, and we'll discuss that a little bit further. So those are kind of some of the main functions that we see here for Virginia, and what we see kind of around the United States too, when you're thinking and talking about this being deployed. Here's a quick rendering kind of a utility scale project. This is not a power wall that you're putting on your garage wall like Sunrun does. But basically, these look like big substations. They actually will have a substation in them, and a port of them. You'll have a utility switching yard in them, let's say that bottom left corner. And then they're almost always being again, attached directly either to a distribution or a transmission substation or a transmission line. Because these, again, are supporting the utility grid, whether it be the distribution or transmission grid. And thus they're charging their batteries from that grid, and also, again, deploying those batteries later on to supply the grid with power. What you will not see on a battery energy storage site is a tower for a smokestack or something like that, because again, we're not burning a fuel, let's say propane or fuel oil or natural gas, to generate the electrons to fill up those batteries, to charge those batteries. They always have a security fence around there or a wall. Importantly, also, you're not going to see a parking lot on here. This is not a Walmart. There's basically, once they're operational, maybe one person coming to visit once a month to do maintenance. There's no one in like the control sheds turning on and off a switch to charge or discharge the batteries. Also, what you'll see usually is a lot of vegetative screening around these, because we don't want these things being seen or heard. They're not playgrounds. In addition to us wanting to basically use existing and maintain existing tree cover around them. Okay. All right. When we break open one of these containers, or what we call a battery enclosure specifically, these are now being custom built to hold these batteries. You'll have kind of going from left to right. You'll see on the left, basically the battery kind of cooling system, and probably has different alarm systems in there to keep track of everything, and fire sensors, etc. In the middle there, you'll see a bunch of racks of batteries. Those are actual batteries. And then on the right side, you'll see a couple racks of basically called the battery management systems. Those turn the power, charge and discharge the batteries, control the larger enclosure there in that system. You'll see also these enclosures are usually up off the ground. They will have underground conduit that connect all of them into the substations and then the larger electricity grid. They'll either be up on pilings or cement pads. Okay. There are a lot of different types of enclosures, but in general, again, you'll see all of them basically have racks of batteries, battery management systems, and other HVAC and other control alarm systems in them. Quickly on East Point, we are a dedicated utility scale battery energy storage. We have experience here in Virginia. We actually developed the first project for Rappahannock Electric Cooperative, the first utility scale project. It's very small, 2 megawatt, 8 megawatt hour duration. It's over in Spotsylvania County. It's been operational for about 5 years now, I believe. We also then sold some of the initial larger projects to Dominion. The largest operational project actually now in the state is Dry Bridge that we developed, constructed and owned and operated by Dominion. That's over in Chesterfield County. Been going now for about almost 2 years. We are operating other projects in Texas, constructing a transmission size project in Texas also now. That should be operational next year. And I've done permitting work in Democratic, Republican, rural, urban counties. We've gotten permits in city of Lynchburg, Chesterfield County recently, Loudoun, and Prince William counties also. I'm doing some permitting work in Fauquier County right now also. Love to show this slide because I think it gives a great example of kind of when we're starting to think about how does energy storage help reduce greenhouse gas emissions on the energy sector's grid. This is a graphic from PJM, the transmission grid operator, that again will show kind of a summer peak demand look with the time on the x-axis here during the day and the price actually on the left y-axis right there. But as you can see here, kind of at the bottom, you have renewables, and this probably is either a wind turbine or a dam providing base load power here, constant, cheaper power structure. Again, then nuclear, and then you start to see natural gas, coal, fuel oil, let's say, or other petroleum kind of at the top when it's the most expensive and actually the dirtiest power. You'll see kind of the amount of carbon that might be burned or again kind of linked to each electron as you go up these sources gets higher and higher and higher. It also gets more expensive. Your batteries kind of again function that we're going to be charging these batteries though during midnight, the late night hours when it's cheapest, the power is cheapest and lowest in demand. And also has probably the least amount of carbon associated with those electrons, and then putting it back on the grid and basically trying to displace that again in this green box at the top there, the dirtiest and most expensive power that's coming on the grid. Okay, and this is usually we're talking 40, 50, 60 times a year would be how often you want to probably use these batteries to displace that, and we're talking 3 to 4 hours at a time. I share this graphic, and this came, you might, for those of you who saw this article a couple of years ago in the New York Times, or actually last year, it's a great example of kind of how battery energy storage has facilitated and helps kind of, this isn't the California example, but a grid with a lot of renewable energy on it. How do battery energy storage basically help those renewable assets like solar even reduce further the power, reduce further the pollution or the greenhouse gases, but also makes the solar power work better. Right here, I want you to focus on basically that middle tranche of generation, which it says gas. It might be a little harder to serve. And you have your solar power in the middle. This is 2021 on your left side. And then in the right side graphic, obviously that solar chunk has gotten a lot bigger, all right, because they deployed a lot more solar. And what you see on the right, though, is that batteries basically being deployed during that shoulder or that peak time. And what it has done is basically, again, displace a lot of that gas that was being used in that shoulder or that peak time period, which is one, basically helping the grid being cheaper, but also, again, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions associated with providing everybody power. This is kind of the graph that shows how those batteries will work then during the day. They're again filling up with some power, but in the California case, they're really actually charging a lot during the day when that solar is putting so much power. In the case of California, so much, there's more power than the grid can handle. These batteries are basically absorbing all that power, charging that power, and it's actually helping provide better pricing to all those solar projects also. So it helps the economics of solar projects. Again, then we're discharging that power and that peak period from 4 to 8 p.m. Again, displacing all that gas and all those emissions. Finally, it's not always the case that batteries, though, are guaranteed to reduce emissions. They can be in the case of like Texas. You don't see those big kind of dips and curves here. This is a similar type of time last year. It's just the ERCOT Texas grid is a lot different from a renewable and its power mix. And you can see how the batteries in general are just kind of charging and discharging all the time, except for, again, your peak power in the afternoon. And a lot of the cases is, again, the electrons on the grid, and unless it's connected directly to a solar power project or a wind project, kind of behind the meter for that project, you might say, the battery is not determining, the electron that's going into it, if it has a greenhouse gas emission associated with it or not. Okay, so at the same time, batteries can be very helpful. It can also still be providing actually demand for other, let's say, carbon emitting generation sources. What is better, obviously, is, okay, let's say here we're using a bunch of combined cycle natural gas. And we're displacing, let's say, the coal though at the end of the day. So, all right, do you get a net gain there? Yes. All right. Finally, not finally, but battery energy safety. There's a lot of new standards that have been developed with a lot of fire safety professionals. One specifically called National Fire Protection Alliance 855. This is guidance that basically tells all the developers and or stakeholders, jurisdictions, what are the fire safety requirements required, the testing required for your batteries, the type of equipment you can have, the designs can you have. They need to be outside, not in buildings anymore, for example, or large utility scales can't be in large structures, buildings anymore. The type of emergency response plans you need to have, how often do you train with them? All these different things are kind of been built into the industry now and ensure the projects operate in a safe manner. Finally, and a couple of things just regarding kind of what are we looking for as project developers. These sites for a distribution site need to be between 1 and 5 acres. That'd be for a small, let's say 10, 20 megawatt hour, 2 to 3 hour duration project. And for transmission size sites, we're looking for 20 to 30 acres. So this is not the 100, 200, a couple hundred acres that you might need for larger utility scale solar projects. Okay, the size and the footprint is determined by basically the megawatts and the duration. The more power you want to be able to put on the grid for the longer amount of time, the more enclosures you need and the more land you need. Okay. We do prefer to site these on industrial land and or kind of rural locations. You don't necessarily want them to buy a bunch of multifamily housing, just like you don't want to put a data center by a multifamily house. And a lot of the ordinances we are seeing, the basic stuff that should be in them, and are you talking about the type of permit you need is discretionary usually. How far they should be set back from property lines, 100 feet in enclosure minimum from a property line, for example. The decommissioning plan you need to have for when the projects are done and how do you recycle the batteries, the type of emergency response plan you need, making sure you're adhering to local noise ordinances. And finally, again, kind of that NFP 855, that guidance, which is evolving every 3 years, is kind of the best practice we see to ensure that every project going forward is meeting the most up-to-date fire safety designs. That's what I'm going to end with. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. And reminder to folks to please put any questions you have in the Q&A box and we'll get to them at the end. And now I'll toss it to Sarah.
Thank you. Let me get this going. All right. My slides are up, I think.
Yes.
Everybody seeing my slides? Okay, thanks, Lillian. Thank you all for having me. Thank you, Lillian and Brittany, for inviting us and having this panel. I obviously love talking about energy storage, and this is a great group to talk about it with. So I'm going to talk to you about long duration storage, and you're probably going to hear me say multi-day storage more than I say long duration storage. I'll explain myself. That's mostly because the product that my company makes is a multi-day storage product. But I'm going to talk a little bit through what, sorry for my funny N that got, I think it got converted in the PowerPoint, but a little bit through what Form Energy is. So the company that I work for, Form Energy, is a technology company and a manufacturer. So this is just a quick snapshot of sort of where our locations are, who it has invested, who our leadership is, or where they came from. But essentially, we're a company that was founded in 2017 and has been working to develop this rechargeable 100-hour iron air battery since that time. This is a diagram showing a very simplified version of how the battery works. So essentially what we do is we take a metallic iron plate and we rust it to release electrons. So that's discharging the battery. When we want to recharge the battery, we feed an electric current. So we charge the battery back up by feeding an electric current and reversing that rusting process. So you take your rusty plate and it converts back into a metallic iron state. As a non-chemist or engineer, that seems like magic to me, but I think it's really cool. The process is very simple and straightforward for the most part. This technology that allows us to have a battery that discharges for 100 hours was created because iron, air, and water are essentially the major components. They're extremely cost effective. They're very safe. It's very easily scalable, as iron, air, and water are abundantly available across the globe. And it's just a very durable chemistry and product. So, this is going to look a little bit like what Chris just showed us, but our batteries are different than lithium ion on the inside, but from the outside, they're going to look a lot alike. We have enclosures, we have cells inside those enclosures, and they have some HVAC in there too. So I won't linger too long on this one, but this just shows you what our systems look like. And I will say, just because I know this group is interested in this, long duration storage tends to take up more space than lithium ion. Lithium ion, you can pack more megawatts into a smaller space. But keep in mind that while you're packing in more megawatts, with long duration storage, you have a heck of a lot more energy in each of those containers. So this is just across the country. Our technology is new, as many of these long duration technologies are emerging technologies. We have deals with customers across the country that to build our batteries over the next few years. Our very first one is being built in Great River Energy, Minnesota. That's this one kind of in the top. And the enclosures for that project are going to be shipping in, like, I want to say days from now, but very, very soon, we're going to have our first batteries leaving our factory in West Virginia and heading to Minnesota to actually get installed and start operating and showing what long duration technologies can really do on the grid. These batteries are being built at our state-of-the-art factory, which we've just built in the last couple of years out in West Virginia, as I said, so next door to you all. And this is the site of a former steel mill. It was one of the largest in West Virginia, and really felt like the perfect home for an iron-based battery to have the folks who just know so much about steel in a part of the country that has such strong knowledge. So these batteries are here in this factory and rolling out, as I said, in the next few weeks, going to be heading out. So let me jump into what is multi-day and long duration energy storage. How does it work? This slide is also, trying to keep it a little bit simple in these slides, but basically it's like having a giant reservoir. Chris mentioned pumped hydro, but imagine a giant reservoir in the form of these batteries, right? And so the reservoir that Chris mentioned that you all have in Virginia is, falls in this intraday long duration. I think it's about Bath County about 11 hours. I don't know, in that range of how long you'll get energy out of that battery when you run it continuously. So for the pumped hydro, you run that reservoir from full to empty, you can have about 11-ish hours of power. So you'll find that some different technologies in this category of what we call intraday. So that's in your 10 to maybe 24 hours of duration. Multi-day storage, which is where our battery falls, has 100 hours. And you'll see a few different technologies in this range that have just multiple days of energy capacity in there. And so, this is really just like you had an enormous reservoir that could, go from full to empty, and it would take 100 hours to fully discharge those batteries. And then you have your short duration technologies, which are, lithium ion essentially, and those are really great at, your peak shaving, your inter-hour, adjusting of power and shifting of power. And all of these batteries work well together to really round out the system. I will point out down here, so these are some, very approximations of cost across these different types. What you'll notice is that your short duration storage is a lot cheaper on a per megawatt basis. So to build a 1 megawatt of 4-hour batteries is going to cost you less than to build 1 megawatt of multi-day storage. But if you go back to how much energy you get out, what's that dollar per megawatt hour or kilowatt hour, you're going to see that flip. And so you see that multi-day storage, when it comes to energy cost and just getting those megawatt hours out, is significantly cheaper when you look at it from that perspective. So it's all about what you need in that moment and sort of costs you're looking at. So this is a form battery, but this is going to be, somewhat true of your long duration batteries. This kind of shows just a comparison. This shows you that your long duration battery, these are two 10 megawatt batteries. You'll have a form battery, which is 100-hour duration. And you'll have a lithium ion, a short duration battery. And what you're going to see is that your short duration battery is going to be discharging and recharging every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Throughout the whole year, you'll see this cycle, daily charging and discharging. And, small amounts of energy, but always there, always useful. And then you'll see our battery is, a 10 megawatt battery is going to have 1,000 megawatt hours of power of energy inside of it. And you'll see that over the course of a year, you'll use that battery differently. You'll see some charging and discharging each day from that battery, a little bit like a lithium ion battery. But what you'll see, the trend over the course of the year is you'll see there'll be times in the spring, in the fall. This is actually a California example, so it's not exactly a East Coast, perfect East Coast match, but you'll see when you have an abundance of energy on the system, a lot of solar and wind available and not a lot of demand, you'll see the battery net charging, getting full, getting ready for those events in the summer when you have those heat waves and you need to discharge the battery. And you'll see some, in this particular case, you don't see any full discharges. We do have some plots that show full discharges, but you'll also see that this battery maintains a full day's worth of power just as a reserve. So you're able to sort of use your battery to do a lot of great things over the course of the year and also maintain sort of backup power all the time if you choose. You don't have to. This is an example of sort of what different types of technologies there are in this long duration space. So there's generally 4 categories. You have your mechanical, so that's your pumped hydro and a lot of other sort of mechanical technologies. Thermal, so you're storing heat and reusing that heat to make energy. Chemical, this is going to be a lot of your hydrogen, green hydrogen would fall into this category. And your electrochemical, which is where you find our battery and some other types of batteries. And so this gives you a bit of an overview of the types of energy. This is, I would say, not a super accurate market readiness analysis, but you'll see that a lot of these technologies are either now available or getting really close. The next slide is one I actually also grabbed from Dominion when I saw them give this presentation. And this is just kind of showing you there are so many companies working on this type of long duration technology. And this shows sort of, it says 75 plus. There's a whole bunch of companies in this space working to bring these technologies to market at various stages of readiness and investment. But you'll see that there's just a lot of folks working on this technology, on this innovation. So as it says here, why do we need this? And I think somebody submitted this question early on in the registration process. Why do we need long duration batteries when we have short duration batteries and we know how they work? So the first overview is just sort of we're seeing a lot more challenges to the grid. We're seeing rapid load growth. This is sort of, this is in all the news headlines, rapid load growth in the electric sector. We haven't seen this in many, many years. And suddenly we're starting to see a real rise in demand. A lot of that demand is being driven by data centers. I know in Virginia, I think you have more data centers than anywhere else in the US right now. And the need to supply power while maintaining a reliable system and also meeting the other goals that the state has around clean energy, around reliability, and around affordability is just, critically important. You're also seeing as renewable resources grow, we have more dependence on resources that aren't always there when we need them. And so they need a backup system to make them work for us, to make the grid stay reliable with that increase in intermittent renewables. And at the same time that the intermittent renewables are growing, you're seeing the sort of traditional fossil fuel resources aging and retiring. And what you'll see on the right side of this slide is how those resources operate. Those resources operate when, especially, this is an example from the Southeast that is a reliability only gas peaker. And you'll see these things don't run for 1 or 2 hours. These things run for long stretches because of the need to have coverage, have reliability, have backup power for these long stretches of time. So you're going to need resources that can fill in these gaps when these resources do retire. So this is just a bit of another example. I think we've all mentioned these new, sort of reliability risks that are driven by weather. You see, lulls in when the wind is blowing. This is from New England, but you see sort of days when you can't count on that wind being there and you need something to back it up. This is from the West. The center graphic is from the West. So you see a lot of, you see back-to-back heat waves when there's not always time to recharge your short duration batteries. You need something that can ride out that whole heat wave and not have to pull from the grid during those grid stress moments. And I know we've all mentioned Winter Storm Uri. We've seen a number of winter storms over the last few years that have brought us either actual extreme conditions or, brought us very close to blackouts. So, I think it's another thing to know that we need, this is many days that more power, firm power was needed in Texas. So this is making similar points. I mean, it shows that all storage resources are really important and valuable during critical periods of energy scarcity. But it shows sort of the difference that longer duration products can cover more of those grid stress hours. And what we've found in New England, this was based on a look at weather in New England and how it affected, how it could have been met with different types of storage resources. I think what you see is RTOs like ISO New England pointing out concerns around charging during these red, high grid stress moments. You want to be able to use those short duration batteries when they're most useful for those peak moments, and then let them rest while and ride these other long duration batteries to their, till they're through and you get through that grid stress moment. So they all work together to really cover these grid stress events. One of the last thing, I think this is one of my last slides, but is just this is, I don't know how many folks are familiar with natural gas and water utilities. I'm really not myself, but I have a colleague who was a commissioner, and he said, the other two utilities are a lot more boring. And he said more boring because they have storage. Natural gas has abundant storage, water has abundant storage, so they're able to sort of work within a system. Electric utilities have to we have to make the energy in that moment. All the energy that we need has to be made in that moment and used in that moment, unless we have the ability to store it. And so, storage of all durations is really important for this, and for creating the flexibility to save cost. You don't have, your system has to be much more elaborate and overbuilt in order to meet that moment when the moment changes from, a low in the spring to an absolute high in those summers or winter peaking moments. You're going to have all of this unutilized or underutilized infrastructure when those aren't, you're not hitting those peaks. But, having the flexibility is going to make the system simpler, safer, and just more reliable if you're able to store the energy and use it when it's most needed, store it when it's most affordable, and then spread those savings across to customers. This is, this final slide shows just that. I think a really important point that, I think Lillian read my background as having come from the Nature Conservancy before this. Something that I saw when I was there was concern around how much we need to build. When we look at how much it needs to change and how much needs to get built to achieve clean energy goals, it can be pretty intimidating. And I think one thing that that we found in a number of studies we've done is that as you add in long duration storage, you optimize the resources that you are building. So therefore, you don't have to build so much to achieve the same goals. So you don't have to build quite as much lithium ion storage. You don't have to build quite as much new renewables, quite as many transmission upgrades. in order to achieve the clean energy goals that we want to achieve as a state or as a country. And so I think that what it shows, I mean, numbers speak really. You know, I'm in a business. We see huge savings. That's translated to savings to customers. But I think we also see savings to land use as well when you look across and how much needs to be built and where. Oh no, I had one more slide because this one was really neat. So this one just shows, this is a kind of quick and dirty analysis. So I wouldn't put like loads of stock into it. But what I will say is this is an estimate that shows had we had an additional 1 gigawatt of multi-day storage in PJM's last capacity market auction, we could have seen capacity prices reduced by 15%. And you know, that's just shifting the curve so that you have more firm resources shifting down to a lower price point and really reducing costs across all of PJM. So this is sort of a, you know, a call to what is the economic value of these resources of storage, of multi-day storage to the grid and to an operator like PJM and RTO that crosses many states with many different state goals. Everyone has a goal of reducing cost to customers. And so I think that this is just shows that we can do that. We can also do that while meeting the state goals that states like Virginia have for clean energy. That is my actual last slide. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And up next, we have Stephanie.
Great, thanks. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Awesome. So I lost the mute button as soon as I hit the share screen button. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. Thanks to Sarah, Chris, and Thad for the really excellent presentations. I'm learning so much on this webinar, so I'm sure other folks are as well. And I think this leads really well into the conversation that we're going to have now about the policy landscape. So some quick background. My name is Stephanie Gagnon-Rodriguez. I'm our Director for Regional Clean Economies at the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, also known as C2ES. We are an independent, nonpartisan, and nonprofit organization that's been around since 1998, working at the international, federal, and state and local levels to advance ambitious, just, and durable solutions to our most pressing climate and clean energy challenges. Most of the work that we do is focused specifically on policy, although a lot of our work is specifically with the business community, where we work to develop the business case for investing in these solutions. And then the Regional Clean Economies Initiative brings together this federal policy conversation with communities around the country to really listen and learn to where folks see their specific and local economic opportunity in the build out of these kinds of advanced energy solutions, to collectively identify what some of the biggest challenges and barriers might be, and then collaboratively work together to develop policy solutions that can help to overcome those barriers in a way that promotes job creation, attracting investment at the local level, and community prosperity. I mentioned this program because this is kind of how I got involved in the energy storage conversation in Virginia. Last year, we did a project culminating in a regional roundtable that we hosted in Richmond, where we were focusing on the long duration energy storage opportunity. We brought together stakeholders representing local businesses and government and community leaders, NGOs, labor, academia, all kinds of other experts to really think about what this could look like for the Commonwealth, and also considering what other questions people might have or opportunities might come out of this. Definitely a big thing that we learned from the conversation was that many communities are really still kind of getting introduced to energy storage as a concept, to the different kinds of technologies that can be utilized to build out energy storage resources, especially kind of understanding the difference between what a power wall in your home looks like versus a grid scale resource might look like. And so really focusing on the education piece, on asking questions and trying to identify what communities want to learn about this area was really foundational and important for really developing our understanding of what's needed, but also for any kind of next steps for building out energy storage. So with that, I have a couple of slides prepared to talk through some of the policy landscape. I'm going to talk a little bit about, oh, that's not controlling my slides. Here we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about federal and state, but I did want to kind of mention how all of this comes together in an ecosystem. Obviously, no single policy interacts in a vacuum. They're all kind of interacting with one another. So really thinking about how the interplay of federal policy connects to the regional level, connects to the state level, and then even connects to the local level. I know we heard a lot about safety and zoning and local ordinances and how that kind of actually affects the build out of projects directly. So looking at the federal level, not comprehensive, but I did want to talk about a couple of really key policy areas that I think are really important to watch. So the biggest incentive for energy storage projects that's coming from the federal level is the 48E and 45Y tax credits. These are the clean energy investment and production tax credits. These have been around for a very long time, but under the Inflation Reduction Act, they were able to be applied to standalone energy projects. And then what is really interesting that I wanted to point out is that we saw a lot of change to the structure of the many different kinds of tax credits in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And so these credits have been updated, so they're going to phase out early for wind and solar, but the folks who wrote the tax credit are really prioritizing keeping several different kinds of energy technologies as part of this eligibility for this credit out through 2033. And battery storage is one of those. It's alongside geothermal and nuclear, which really, I think, demonstrates the priority for folks of how battery storage systems really kind of fit into our overall energy mix, how it supports firming the energy grid, the integration of intermittent resources. And something that we hear a lot as a priority is making sure that as hyperscalers are trying to come online, they're trying to build a lot of power really quickly. They need a lot of capacity. Batteries have a role to play here. I also wanted to talk about the 45X tax credit. This, I think, definitely much more on the lithium ion space than others, but is the advanced energy manufacturing tax credit. Again, an IRA tax credit that was changed a little bit under the Big Beautiful Bill, but I think does demonstrate continued support for the manufacture of batteries and critical materials that go into these systems here in the United States. What was specifically changed about this credit in the Big Beautiful Bill was the addition of stringent foreign entities of concern restrictions. So essentially saying you can't derive a certain amount of assistance from these fiat countries. Most notably, this is kind of targeting China, but there are some other nations that are on the list. On the other side, apart from the tax credit space, the federal government has been offering grants and loans and other kinds of investments that are incentives that support the demonstration and deployment of cutting edge technologies, of research and development, and then the supply chain for building out batteries and energy storage systems in the United States. A couple that I wanted to key in on are the long duration energy storage demonstration and deployment grants that provided, I think it was about 500 million over the past couple of years to support specifically long duration energy storage. Additionally, under the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's a pot of money set aside for battery and critical minerals manufacturing and recycling grants through DOE. Several rounds of this funding have already gone out, but DOE has announced this summer that they plan to offer an additional round of funding for these programs. So that is coming very soon. And then also over the summer, DOE announced grants for critical facility energy resilience that specifically focus on supporting energy storage projects that are on critical infrastructure like hospitals. And so that I think really highlights the priorities of this administration and of others at looking at how energy storage can play not just as kind of a grid firming asset, but also on the resilience side. So looking at Virginia, I do want to take a minute to talk specifically about the Clean Economy Act before I get to some other examples of what other states are doing. As of 2021, Virginia is required to deploy, or utilities in Virginia are required to deploy 3,100 megawatts of energy storage by 2035. This is split up between Dominion and Appalachian, and you can see the interim targets at the bottom of this slide. This is, as you'll see in a second, the second largest target in the country, very exciting and important, and includes also provisions for integrating energy storage plans into utilities, integrated resource plans. It also provides for the diversification of the types of energy storage projects. Some portion of it should be behind the meter, 35% of this should be developed by third parties. They can't, every year get all of the requirements from one single project. It should be diversified among different projects. So as I mentioned, this is almost the largest target in the country for energy storage, following only New York at 6 gigawatts. There are 2 targets that specifically call out long duration energy storage, and the other 11 targets specifically just kind of say energy storage. What I wanted to point out about the differentiation in this, and this is something that we heard last year in our roundtable that we hosted in Virginia, is that as you're kind of hearing from Sarah and from Chris, there are different applications for short duration energy storage and long duration energy storage. And sometimes the market isn't necessarily going to make that determination itself. And so especially with some of these kind of cutting edge technologies or new chemistries, it's important to differentiate when states are really interested in getting the benefits of long duration storage versus getting the benefits of short duration energy storage. So that's been really interesting to see California and New York specifically calling that out. Another thing that California has done is kind of talking about the non-lithium ion storage rather than necessarily specifying that it's long duration energy storage, which is kind of supporting the different kinds of chemistries that are being developed. Something else that other states are doing, I know I mentioned Virginia is doing this, they're requiring utilities to include energy storage in their integrated resource plans. This is another way that states are able to kind of set forth that they're prioritizing energy storage as part of the power mix, and also making sure that there's a plan ahead in the future. So I think 20 states, by my last count, are requiring some form of this. I wanted to flag a couple of other examples of how different states are approaching energy storage, whether that's, many of them have procurement targets, many of them are using integrated resource plans, but some states are doing different kinds of approaches to funding or to different kinds of studies that can really help to determine what the best kind of energy storage implementation for their state looks like, and also help to get individual projects off the ground. So New York and California, I think people generally point to them pretty often as examples of, high levels of funding or of, quicker innovators on some of these different kinds of policies. Both of them have invested millions in supporting directly the implementation of different projects. Both of them, I call them out here because we've done some work recently on LDES, have specific call outs for long duration energy storage projects or for non-lithium ion projects. Other options for states, though, don't necessarily have to rely only on grant funding or on procurement targets. Maine, for example, commissioned a study to look at how energy storage and specifically long duration energy storage could help meet some of the goals that the state has and how it would really fit into the state's future energy planning. So that resulted in a report in 2024. And then on the other side, there's also some incentive programs that, for example, New Jersey is doing. So they're providing a direct incentive that either augments, complements, or acts in lieu of the federal incentive that can support the deployment of transmission scale and distributed energy storage. So just a few examples there. Again, not entirely comprehensive, happy to get to the discussion, but I did really want to make sure that we were talking about the different levels of policy and the kinds of options out there. I'm really looking forward to the conversation, and thanks for having me.
I wanted to thank you all so much for joining us today for this last session of the Path to 100% Clean series. And a special thank you to our speakers here for sharing your expertise and your knowledge. We'll be sending out a recording of today's webinar to all the registered participants, so you'll have it as a resource to revisit, and please feel free to share it with your colleagues. And thank you all again, and that concludes our Energy Storage 101 webinar.